A canine dog meets an abandoned kitten no bigger than his paw, and his reaction shocked everyone. At first, it looks like a simple moment of tenderness. But what if this tiny creature carried a secret no one was ready for? A rookie handler suddenly finds her career on the line, her partner's instincts doubted, and her world turned upside down. Behind the cuteness lies a trail of danger, betrayal, and a hidden truth that could burn everything down. As the clock ticks, loyalty is tested, and lives hang in the balance. Why did the dog protect the kitten, and what deadly secret was really hiding in its fur? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the waterfront as Nell Calder walked her patrol route with Rook, her German Shepherd K9 partner. Her boots clicked against the wooden planks of the pier while Rook's powerful frame moved beside her with practiced precision. After 6 months together, they had fallen into a comfortable rhythm. Unit YY5 checking the South Pier area. Nell spoke into her radio, using Rook's official designation. The morning was quiet except for the gentle lapping of waves and distant seagull cries. Suddenly, Rook's ears perked up. Without warning, he broke from formation, something he had never done before in their months of training and patrol work. Nell's heart jumped into her throat. "Rook, heel!" she commanded, her voice steady despite her surprise. But the massive Shepherd ignored her, moving with purpose toward the shadowy space beneath the pier's edge. A small crowd of early morning joggers and coffee-clutching observers gathered, phones already raised. Nell heard worried murmurs as Rook disappeared under the wooden structure. "Ma'am, your dog," a concerned woman started to say. "Please stay back," Nell ordered, fighting to keep her voice professional while her mind raced. What had gotten into him? This wasn't like Rook at all. She crouched down to peer under the pier, expecting the worst. Instead, what she saw made her breath catch. Rook had curled his large body protectively around a tiny orange kitten, no bigger than a shoebox. The little creature was shivering, wet from the morning dew, its matted fur showing signs of neglect. Instead of aggression, Rook displayed a gentleness that seemed impossible for his imposing size. He looked up at Nell with his amber eyes, as if to say, "This one needs help." The crowd's worried whispers turned to sounds of surprise and delight. The clicking of phone cameras increased. "Oh my goodness, he's protecting it," someone exclaimed. "That's the sweetest thing I've ever seen," another voice added. Nell's relief was short-lived as her radio crackled. "Unit YY5, report your status," came the stern voice of Captain Creed Dwyer. "Situation under control, sir," Nell responded, her throat tight. "Rook has located an abandoned kitten. He's actually protecting it." "Return to the precinct immediately," came the clipped reply. By the time Nell had carefully collected the kitten and returned to headquarters, the video clips were already spreading across social media. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications as various accounts shared the footage of the fierce police dog turning into a gentle giant for a tiny kitten. Captain Dwyer was waiting in his office, his stocky frame rigid with disapproval. His thinning gray hair was slicked back as always, and his uniform was pristine, but his expression was thunderous. "Officer Calder, explain to me how you lost control of your K9 unit this morning," he demanded as soon as she entered. Nell stood at attention, her back straight. "Sir." Rook detected something wrong and responded. His actions were protective, not aggressive. That's not the point. Dwyer's fingers drummed against his polished desk. "Your dog broke formation without command. He ignored your recall order. This is completely unacceptable for a police K9. Captain, with all due respect, the public sees a heartwarming moment. I see a handler who can't control her dog." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "This department can't afford K9 units that go rogue, even for feel-good social media moments." Nell felt her cheeks flush with both embarrassment and frustration. Rook's instincts have never been wrong, sir. He sensed something wasn't right. It was a stray cat, Officer called her. Not a bomb, not a drug cache, not an accelerant. A cat. Dwyer's voice dripped with disdain. If you can't maintain proper discipline, perhaps you're not suited for canine handling. The words hit Nell like a physical blow. She had worked so hard to earn her place in the K-9 unit, had graduated top of her class. Sir, I understand your concerns, but... Dismissed, Officer Calder. Consider this an official reprimand. One more incident like this, and both you and Unit YY5 will be reassigned. Walking back to her patrol car where Rook waited, Nell felt torn between her training and her instincts. The German shepherd's tail wagged at her approach, his amber eyes watching her with unwavering loyalty. Her phone buzzed again, another notification about the viral video, now with thousands of shares and comments praising the gentle giant of a police dog. The public saw something beautiful in Rook's actions, while her superior saw only disobedience. Nell scratched behind Rook's ears, remembering how carefully he had curled around that tiny kitten. "You knew something was wrong, didn't you, boy?" she whispered. "And you didn't care about protocol, you just knew you had to help." Rook pressed his head against her hand, and in that moment, Nell made her decision. She might have been rattled by Captain Dwyer's reprimand, but she couldn't ignore what her heart was telling her. Rook's protective instinct toward that kitten meant something. Her partner's judgment had never failed her before. The rest of their shift was spent with both of them hyper-aware of each other's movements. Nell noticed Rook seemed more alert than usual, his head turning at small sounds she couldn't hear. His powerful nose working overtime. She found herself watching him more closely, too, wondering what else he might sense that she couldn't yet understand. Throughout the day, fellow officers approached her with mixed reactions. Some praised Rook's gentle behavior, while others echoed Captain Dwyer's concerns about discipline. The viral video had sparked a department-wide debate about K-9 protocol versus instinct. But as Nell watched Rook perform his duties with his usual precision for the rest of their shift, she couldn't help but feel that this morning's incident was more than just a random act of compassion. There was something in his determination, his insistence, that nagged at her police instincts. She had been taught to trust her gut in the academy, and right now, her gut was telling her that Rook's behavior, and Captain Dwyer's intense reaction to it, deserved a closer look. The viral moment might have caused professional criticism, but it had also shown her something important about both her partner and her commanding officer. That evening, as Nell filed her daily report, she chose her words carefully, documenting exactly what had happened without speculation. But she kept her own private notes as well, marking down the details that seemed significant. Rook's unwavering certainty, the location under the pier, and Captain Dwyer's disproportionate response to what should have been a minor incident. The Kitten, meanwhile, had been taken to a local shelter where it was already being treated for mild dehydration and malnutrition. Nell made a mental note to check on its progress, feeling there might be more to learn about why it had been abandoned under that particular pier, at that particular time. The fluorescent lights of the emergency veterinary clinic buzzed overhead, as Nell cradled the small cardboard box containing the kitten. The waiting room was mercifully quiet at this hour, with only a worried couple and their limping golden retriever occupying the hard plastic chairs. "I need to see Dr. Finch," Nell told the receptionist, her police badge visible on her belt. "It's urgent." Within minutes, Dr. Aurelia Finch emerged through the swinging doors. Her dark curly hair was escaping from its messy bun, and her scrubs had seen better days, but her eyes were alert and focused. "Officer Calder? What have we got?" Nell carefully placed the box on the examination table in one of the treatment rooms. "Found this little one under the pier. My K-9 partner Rook was acting strange about it, protective, not aggressive." Dr. Finch gently lifted the kitten, her experienced hands moving with practiced care. The tiny creature barely stirred, its gray fur matted and dirty. "Let's see what we have here." She ran a scanner over the kitten's shoulder area, frowning, at the beep. "There's a microchip, but—" Her fingers probed the area. "Something's not right. The insertion point looks tampered with. Scraped almost." Nell leaned in closer. Scraped? Like someone tried to remove it. Aurelia's nose wrinkled. "And there's something else. Do you smell that?" Nell inhaled. Beyond the usual animal clinic smells, there was something sharp and artificial clinging to the kitten's fur. "Some kind of chemical?" "Yes, and it's not anything we typically use here." Aurelia's concern was evident in her furrowed brow. "I'll run some tests, but this isn't normal. Where did you say you found it?" Before Nell could answer, her phone buzzed. A text from Captain Dwyer. "My office, now!" 20 minutes later, Nell stood at attention in Dwyer's office, her heart pounding. The captain's polished nameplate gleamed on his desk, matching his immaculate appearance. Everything about him was precise, controlled. "Officer Calder," he began, his voice deceptively calm. "That little scene your dog caused this morning? It's all over social media. Police dog goes rogue to save kitten. Not exactly the image we're trying to project." "Sir," Rook was responding. "To something—" What he was doing, Dwyer cut her off, was showing weakness. A K-9 unit needs to command respect, not play nursemaid to strays. He slid a folder across his desk. "Effective immediately, Unit YY5 is suspended from street duty pending review." Nell felt like she'd been punched in the gut. "Sir, please—" "This isn't a discussion, Calder." Dwyer stood, straightening his already straight tie. "And the timing couldn't be worse. We've got Tech Guard Security making a pitch to the City Council next week. They're promising drones, AI-powered surveillance, the works. No liability issues, no bad PR from emotional animals." Through the office window, Nell could see men in expensive suits gathering in the conference room. Their sleek presentation. Materials featured glossy images of drones and security cameras. "You're dismissed, officer," Dwyer said, already turning his attention to his computer screen. Nell's phone vibrated as she left the building. A text from Aurelia. "Tests back. You need to see this." The veterinary clinic was busier now, but Aurelia pulled Nell straight into a back office. The kitten lay sleeping in a clean cage, hooked up to an IV. "The chemical residue?" Aurelia began, her voice low. "It's a complex compound, something you'd find in industrial settings. And that scraped chip? I managed to get a partial read. It's not a standard pet microchip frequency." Nell felt a chill despite the warm room. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying someone went to a lot of trouble to hide where this kitten came from." Aurelia met her eyes. "And given the chemical traces, I'd bet there are more out there." Back in her car, Nell sat with her hands gripping the steering wheel. Rook, relegated to the back seat instead of his usual working position, whined softly. She reached back to scratch his ears, feeling the familiar rough spot of his training scar. "I know, boy," she whispered. "Something's not right here." The suspension papers felt heavy in her pocket, but heavier still was the growing certainty that Rook hadn't made a mistake at all. He'd stumbled onto something that had powerful people acting very strangely about a simple stray kitten. Through her windshield, she watched Tech Guard's representatives leaving the precinct, their confident strides matching their polished appearances. Captain Dwyer stood at the top of the steps, shaking hands, his smile never reaching his eyes. Nell sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of newspapers and her laptop. Being sidelined from active duty had left her with too much time to think. The morning light filtered through her apartment windows as she pored over local news reports from the past 2 weeks. "Third warehouse fire this month," she muttered, circling another article with a red pen. Something about these incidents nagged at her. She pinned the clippings to a corkboard, connecting them with red string. Her phone buzzed. Another news alert. Breaking: fire at downtown storage facility. Nell's eyes narrowed as she read the location. It was just 2 blocks from where they'd found that strange kitten with the scraped chip. She opened her notebook where she'd been tracking patterns. Each burglary and fire had occurred within a 3-block radius of where stray animals had been reported. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. First, a seemingly abandoned animal would appear, then, within 48 hours, a break-in or fire would follow. "The animals are scouts," she whispered, the realization hitting her. They weren't strays at all. They were planted. Nell grabbed her phone and dialed Dr. Aurelia Finch's number. "Aurelia, remember that chemical smell on the kitten? I think I know what's going on." "Nell, it's 7 in the morning." Aurelia's voice was groggy but concerned. "Meet me at Joe's Diner in an hour. There's something you need to see." At the diner, Nell spread her evidence across the Formica table, while Aurelia sipped her coffee. The veterinarian's eyes widened as she followed the pattern. "So you think these animals are being used to case locations?" Aurelia asked, studying. "The map with its marked incidents." "Exactly. The chemical smell, the scraped chip. Someone's deliberately placing these animals near target locations. They're using them as cover to scout security patterns and entry points. But why remove the microchips? To make them untraceable. If anyone catches one, they can't track where it came from." The bell above the diner door chimed, and Officer Bram O'Keefe walked in, his uniform slightly rumpled from his night shift. Nell had asked him to join them, though she knew he'd be skeptical. "All right, Calder," he said, sliding into the booth. "What's so important you needed me here before I could get some sleep?" Nell explained her theory, pointing out the pattern on her maps and timeline. O'Keefe's expression remained dubious, but he leaned in closer as she spoke. "That's quite a leap," he said, but his tone was more thoughtful than dismissive. "Using animals as scouts?" "Think about it," Nell pressed. "Who questions a stray cat wandering around? Security guards probably even feed them. Meanwhile, these people get eyes on the ground, studying patrol patterns, camera positions, entry points." "And the fires?" Aurelia asked. "Coverage. They torch. The places after robbing them, destroys evidence and makes it harder to determine what was taken." O'Keefe rubbed his chin. "Captain Dwyer warned you to stay away from this case, didn't he?" "Yes. But I can't ignore this. That kitten Rook found. He knew something was wrong. My dog's instincts were better than mine." Aurelia placed her hand over Nell's. "We believe you. The question is, what do we do about it?" "I need access to police reports," Nell said, looking at O'Keefe. "And you're still on active patrol. You could keep an eye out for any more suspicious strays." O'Keefe sighed heavily. "This could cost me my badge if I'm wrong. And if I'm right, we could stop more businesses from being destroyed." The veteran officer studied Nell's face for a long moment. "You really believe this?" "With every fiber of my being." "Fine," he relented. "But we do this carefully. No rushing in, no playing hero. We gather evidence first." Aurelia nodded. "I can check with other vet clinics, see if they've had any similar cases. Animals with scraped chips or chemical residue. And I'll keep mapping the pattern," Nell added. "The next target area should be predictable based on recent stray sightings." They spent the next hour coordinating their unofficial investigation. O'Keefe would pull reports during his shifts, Aurelia would network with local vets, and Nell would continue analyzing patterns and following up on stray animal reports. As they left the diner, O'Keefe pulled Nell aside. "You know Dwyer will have your badge if he finds out about this." "Some things are more important than keeping my badge," she replied. "Those animals are being used and discarded. The people doing this don't care who gets hurt." O'Keefe's expression softened. "You're either going to get yourself fired or prove to be one hell of a detective." He paused. "Be careful, Calder. and keep me posted. Back home, Nell added the latest fire to her map. The pattern was clear now. Like a wave moving through the waterfront district, each incident preceded by the appearance of a seemingly abandoned animal. She thought of the kitten, now safe at Aurelia's clinic, and wondered how many other animals had been used and discarded by these criminals. Her phone buzzed with a text from Aurelia. 2 more Ktten. The evening air hung heavy with anticipation, as Nell, Bram, and Aurelia crouched behind a rusty dumpster across from the suspicious warehouse. Rook lay silently at Nell's feet, his ears pricked forward, alert to every sound. The building's weathered facade loomed before them, its windows dark and uninviting. "Are you sure about this?" Bram whispered, adjusting his position to keep his shoes from scraping against the concrete. "If we're wrong..." "We're not wrong," Nell replied firmly, holding up a stack of papers. "Look at these records. This supposed animal rescue center has Dwyer's signature all over the confiscation approvals. But none of these animals ever made it to legitimate shelters." Aurelia leaned in closer, her dark curls falling forward as she studied the documents in the dim light. "The timing matches perfectly with each of the fires, and that chemical smell on the kitten Rook found." She trailed off, her medical training making the connection all too clear. The warehouse stood silent, a hulking shadow against the night sky. Hours ticked by, marked only by the distant sound of traffic and the occasional shuffle of feet as they took turns stretching their cramped muscles. Just after midnight, the quiet was broken by the sound of approaching vehicles. 3 black vans pulled up to the loading dock, their headlights off. Dark figures emerged, their faces obscured by masks. "Something's happening," Bram muttered, his hand instinctively moving to his service weapon. The masked figures moved with purpose, carrying containers that glinted in the weak streetlight. Nell's heart pounded as she recognized the distinctive shape of accelerant cans. One of the men raised his arm, and suddenly a torch flared to life, casting an orange glow across. "The scene! They're going to burn it down!" Aurelia gasped. But why would they? Her question was cut short by a sound that made Nell's blood run cold, the distinct rattling of metal cages from inside the warehouse. Rook's ears perked up, and a low whine escaped his throat. "There are animals in there," Nell said, already moving. "We have to get them out!" "Nell, wait!" Bram called after her, but she was already running, Rook at her heels. The masked men, focused on spreading accelerant around the building's perimeter, didn't notice their approach. Smoke began to curl from multiple points around the warehouse as the arsonists worked quickly. Nell found a side door and yanked it, open, the metal hot against her palm. Inside, the air was already thick with smoke. Bram and Aurelia caught up just as the first flames began to race up the walls. The warehouse interior was a maze of stacked crates and metal shelving. The rattling grew louder, accompanied now by frightened animal cries. "This way!" Nell called out, following Rook's lead. The German Shepherd moved with purpose, his training kicking in despite the chaos around them. A thunderous crack split the air as one of the wooden support beams gave way. Nell looked up just in time to see burning timber plummeting toward her. Before she could move, Rook's powerful body slammed into her legs, knocking her clear of the falling debris. "Nell!" Aurelia screamed, but Rook was already dragging his partner to safety by her jacket sleeve. Once clear, the dog immediately turned and began barking insistently, pawing at the ground near a large crate. Bram rushed forward, coughing in the thickening smoke, and helped Nell to her feet. "He's trying to tell us something," Nell said, stumbling toward the crate Rook indicated. Through the slats, tiny faces peered out, at least a dozen kittens. Huddled together in terror, Aurelia joined them, her veterinary instinct taking over. "The lock! We need to break it!" Bram didn't hesitate. He raised his service weapon and shot the padlock clean off. Together they began pulling the frightened kittens from the crate, gathering them into their arms. Above them, the roof groaned ominously. Flames had spread across the ceiling, and the heat was becoming unbearable. More beams creaked and shifted, threatening to give way at any moment. "We need to get out now!" Bram shouted over the roar of the fire. They hurried toward the exit, protecting their precious cargo. Rook led the way, constantly checking back to ensure everyone was following. As they burst out into the cool night air, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. The masked men and their black vans were long gone, but they had left behind damning evidence. Evidence that would expose their scheme of using innocent animals in their arson plot. Nell sank to her knees in the grass, still clutching several trembling kittens. Rook pressed against her side, his fur singed but his eyes alert and proud. She wrapped one arm around his neck, overwhelmed with gratitude for her loyal partner who had not only saved her life but had helped uncover the twisted truth behind the fires. Aurelia was already examining the kittens, her experienced hands gentle but efficient. "They're all alive," she announced, relief evident in her voice. "And look, the same chemical smell we found on the first kitten. They were using these poor creatures to spread accelerant through the buildings." Bram stood watch over them, his expression grim as fire trucks began arriving on the scene. "This is going to bring down more than just an arson ring," he said, looking meaningfully at the paperwork that connected Dwyer to the warehouse. "A lot more." The warehouse continued to burn behind them, but the truth it had contained was now safe in their hands. Rook remained vigilant, his body tense and ready to protect his human family from any further danger as the night's chaos unfolded around them. Nell's hands trembled as she held the lab report, her eyes scanning the results over and over. The fluorescent lights of the precinct's evidence room buzzed overhead as the truth crashed down around her. There, in black and white, was the proof she'd been seeking. Traces of accelerant had been found in the rescued kitten's fur samples. "I can't believe we all missed it," she whispered, her voice catching. Rook wasn't being gentle that day at the pier. He was doing exactly what he was trained to do, detecting accelerants. The viral video that had earned her both criticism and coups from the public played in her mind with stark clarity now. Rook's protective curl around the kitten wasn't a sign of softness. It was his alert position, the same stance he took during training when he located suspicious substances. Nell spread the documents across the metal table, connecting the dots that had been there all along. The burglary reports, fire incident logs, and animal control records formed a devastating pattern. Each crime scene had been preceded by reports of stray animals in the area. The criminals weren't just abandoning pets. They were strategically placing them as distractions, their fur treated with the same accelerants later used to start the fires. Her hands shook as she pulled up the authorization forms on her tablet. There it was, Captain Dwyer's signature, appearing again and again on documents transferring seized animals to what they now knew was a sham rescue operation. The same operation they'd caught burning down its own warehouse. "Oh, God," she breathed, feeling sick. The implications were staggering. Her own commanding officer wasn't just looking the other way. He was actively participating in the scheme. The man who'd reprimanded her, who'd tried to sideline Rook, who'd pushed for private security to replace K9 units. It all made horrible sense now. Footsteps in the hallway sent her heart racing. Quickly, she snapped photos of the critical documents, with her phone before carefully returning everything to its proper place. As she slipped out of the evidence room, her mind was already racing ahead to her next steps. She needed to get this information to people she could trust. In her car, she called Aurelia first. The veterinarian answered on the second ring. "The lab results came back," Nell said without preamble. "You were right about that chemical smell. The kitten's fur was coated with accelerant, the same type found at multiple fire scenes." "I knew. Something wasn't right," Aurelia replied, her voice tight with concern. "But this is bigger than we imagined." "It gets worse," Nell continued. I found authorization forms with Dwyer's signature all over them. He's been directing seized animals to that fake rescue center. He's part of this, Aurelia." There was a long pause on the other end. "What are you going to do?" "I need to talk to Bram first. Can you meet us at your clinic in an hour? Bring any records you have of the animals you've treated that came from that rescue." After hanging up, Nell glanced at Rook in the rearview mirror. Her loyal partner sat alertly in the back seat, his amber eyes meeting hers. "You knew all along, didn't you, boy? You were trying to tell us and we just didn't understand." Rook's tail thumped against the seat once, and Nell felt tears prick at her eyes. All this time, while people had been criticizing her handling and questioning Rook's training, he'd been doing exactly what he was supposed to do. The viral moment that had caused such a stir, labeled as cute, dismissed as a sign of weakness, had actually been a warning sign everyone had misinterpreted. At Aurelia's clinic, Bram was already waiting when they arrived. The patrolman's usually easygoing expression was grim as Nell laid out everything she'd discovered. Aurelia spread her own records across the exam table, adding more pieces to the puzzle. "Look at these intake dates," Aurelia pointed out, tracing a pattern through her files. "Every time we received animals from that rescue, there was a major fire within 48 hours in the same general area. They're using the strays to scout locations and establish their presence before the crimes." "And Dwyer's been facilitating it all," Bram said, shaking his head in disgust. "No wonder he wanted to shut down the K9 program. Can't have trained dogs detecting what they're up to." "The private security firm he's been pushing," Nell added. "We need to look into their connections too. This isn't just about the fires and burglaries anymore. This is organized crime with tentacles throughout the department." As they talked, Rook paced the clinic floor, his nails clicking against the tiles. He stopped periodically to nose at the evidence they'd spread out, as if confirming their conclusions. Nell watched him with a mixture of pride and regret. "I'm so sorry I doubted you, partner," she said softly. "You were right from the very beginning." "What's our next move?" Bram asked, his hand resting instinctively on his service weapon. "We can't take this directly to internal affairs, not if Dwyer's involved. He'll be tipped off before we can build a solid case." "We need to document everything," Aurelia said firmly. "Every scrap of evidence, every connection, every signature. And we need to find out where they're keeping the animals now that we've exposed their warehouse operation." Nell nodded, her determination growing stronger. "We also need to warn the other K9 handlers. If they know what to watch for, their dogs might pick up on more evidence. The criminals are getting sloppy. They thought they could hide behind viral videos and public sentiment, but they didn't count on us putting it all together." As they formed their plan, Nell couldn't help but marvel at how it had all unfolded. A single moment on a pier, misunderstood by everyone, had led them to uncover a conspiracy that went to the very heart of the department. And through it all, Rook had never wavered from his training, even when humans had misinterpreted his actions. The truth was out now, and there was no going back. Nell knew they were in danger. Dwyer and his conspirators wouldn't give up their operation easily. But as she looked at her loyal partner and her two trusted allies, she felt stronger than ever. They had evidence, they had each other, and most importantly, they had the truth on their side. Nell's heart pounded as she stood in Assistant District Attorney Marta Greeley's office, spreading out the lab reports and evidence photos across the polished desk. The morning sun streamed through Venetian blinds, casting striped shadows across the damning documents. "Look at these patterns," Nell explained, pointing to a series of photographs. Every single burglary and fire was preceded by reports of stray animals in the area. The lab confirmed accelerant traces on all the rescued kittens. And here, she tapped a document showing Dwyer's signature, "are the transfer authorizations to that fake rescue center." Ada Greeley, a sharp-featured woman, in her 40s, leaned forward in her leather chair, studying the evidence with intense focus. This is compelling, Officer Calder. But to make charges stick against someone as connected as Captain Dwyer, we need ironclad proof. We need to catch them in the act. What are you suggesting? Nell asked, though she already had an inkling of where this was heading. A sting operation, Greeley said, her eyes lighting up with determination. We'll set up our own bait, a decoy kitten treated with harmless chemical markers that will show up under UV light. When they take it, we'll be able to trace exactly where it goes and who handles it. The plan came together over the next few hours. Dr. Aurelia Finch would prepare a realistic-looking kitten with special UV-reactive markers that mimicked accelerant. Signatures. Bram O'Keefe would coordinate with trusted officers for surveillance, and Rook, Nell's faithful partner, would track the operation from start to finish. Remember, Greeley cautioned as they finalized the details, we need solid evidence connecting everything back to Dwyer. Photos, recordings, documents, anything that proves he's orchestrating this scheme. 3 days later, the operation launched. Nell's stomach churned with nervous energy as she watched from an unmarked van. The decoy kitten had been carefully placed in an alley near the waterfront, an area where previous strays had been reported. Rook sat alertly beside her, his ears pricked forward. Target vehicle approaching. Bram's voice crackled through their earpieces. White panel van just like the one from the warehouse fire. Nell held her breath as 2 men in workers' uniforms emerged from the van. They moved with practiced efficiency, scooping up the kitten and checking the area before loading it into their vehicle. They took the bait, Aurelia whispered from her position in the back of the surveillance van, where she monitored vital signs from the decoy kitten's embedded sensors. Tracking signal is strong and clear. The team followed at a safe distance as the van wound through the city streets. Instead of heading to the warehouse district, it turned toward an office complex on the outskirts of town. Nell's pulse quickened. When she recognized the building, it housed several shell companies they'd uncovered during their investigation. All units hold position, Greeley commanded through the radio. Let's see what they do with our little friend. The wait was excruciating. Minutes stretched into hours as they monitored the building. Finally, activity sparked near the loading dock. The same men emerged, carrying boxes of documents to their van. "Move in," Greeley ordered. "Execute the warrant." The operation unfolded like clockwork. Police vehicles converged from all directions, blocking possible escape routes. The suspects were caught completely off guard, surrounded before they could destroy any evidence. Inside the office, they hit the jackpot. Hidden ledgers detailed every aspect of the criminal enterprise, dates and locations of fires, burglary proceeds, and most importantly, regular payments flowing directly into accounts controlled by Captain Dwyer. "Look at this," Bram said, holding up a leather-bound notebook. Every single fire matches the dates when strays were reported. They were using the animals to study wind patterns and test accelerant dispersal. Aurelia, examining the decoy kitten for signs of tampering, shook, her head in disgust. They treated living creatures like disposable tools. It's inhuman. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showed Dwyer receiving regular payments disguised as consulting fees. Security footage captured him meeting with the ringleaders. Email trails revealed his systematic efforts to undermine the K9 unit while steering contracts toward the private security firm that was in on the scheme. "We got him," Greeley declared, surveying the mountains of seized evidence. "Officer Calder, your instincts were spot on. This is exactly what we needed." Nell felt a complex mix of emotions, relief, vindication, and a lingering sadness that someone in a position of trust could orchestrate such cruelty. She knelt beside Rook, scratching behind his ears. "Good boy," she whispered. "You knew all along, didn't you?" Bram clapped her on the shoulder. "You should be proud, Rookie. Not many officers would have followed through when their commanding officer was telling them to back off." "I just couldn't ignore what was right in front of us," Nell replied, watching, as evidence technicians cataloged box after box of documents. especially not when innocent animals were being hurt. Aurelia joined them, her face glowing with quiet pride. You know what this means, right? The K9 program will be vindicated. Rook's reaction that day at the pier, it wasn't a failure. It was exactly what he was trained to do. As the scene bustled with activity, officers securing evidence, detectives conducting preliminary interviews, crime scene technicians taking photographs, Nell felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The truth was finally coming to light, and justice would be served. The ledgers and documents spread across the evidence. Tables told the whole sordid story. Each entry represented not just a crime, but a betrayal of public trust. Captain Dwyer had used his position to orchestrate a scheme that endangered lives, abused animals, and corrupted the very system he was sworn to uphold. Yet amid the darkness of the conspiracy, something positive had emerged. Nell's faith in her partner, her unwillingness to ignore wrongdoing, and the support of dedicated colleagues like Aurelia and Bram had proven stronger than corruption. The evidence they'd gathered would ensure that those responsible would face consequences for their actions. The triumph was short-lived. Just as the arrest warrant was being processed, word came that Captain Dwyer had vanished from the precinct. His office sat empty, computer wiped clean, personal items gone as if he'd anticipated the net closing in. Nell's first instinct was to call Aurelia. The phone rang and rang, going straight to voicemail. A knot formed in her stomach as she dialed. Again. And again. Something's wrong, she told Bram, who stood beside her in the station parking lot. Aurelia always answers, especially during a case like this. She tried the veterinary clinic next. The receptionist informed her that Dr. Finch hadn't shown up for her afternoon shift. The dread crystallized into certainty when Nell's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your vet friend is quite concerned about all those poor animals. Would be a shame if anything happened to them. Or her. He's got her, Nell whispered, showing Bram the message. Dwyer has Aurelia. Before they could formulate a plan, emergency calls started flooding dispatch. The city's main animal impound facility was on fire. Thick black smoke rose against the afternoon sky, visible even from miles away. That's not random, Nell said, already running to her vehicle. He's destroying evidence and... Her voice caught. What if Aurelia's in there? They raced toward the burning building, sirens wailing. As they approached, Nell spotted Dwyer's personal vehicle parked half-hidden, behind a dumpster. Fresh scratches marked the passenger door, as if someone had fought being forced inside. The fire was spreading rapidly, far too fast for a natural blaze. Nell recognized the telltale signs of accelerant use, the same technique from all the other fires. But this time it wasn't just about destroying property or creating a distraction. This was personal. Through the smoke, she caught glimpses of movement inside, a figure struggling against restraints. Aurelia! Call for backup! Nell shouted to Bram as she grabbed her gear. And get fire rescue here now! But before she could. Move toward the building! A police cruiser screeched to a halt. 2 officers jumped out, weapons drawn. Nell called her, freeze, hands where we can see them. Her blood ran cold as she realized what was happening. Dwyer had planned this perfectly. He'd made it look like she was the arsonist all along, taking revenge after being suspended. Who would believe her now, with her prints all over the evidence, from their investigation, and her connection to every scene through Rook? You don't understand, she tried to explain even as they moved to cuff her. Dr. Finch is inside. Dwyer is framing me. Through the smoke, she locked eyes with Aurelia in one of the kennel windows. Time seemed to slow as she watched flames lick up the walls behind her friend. This was her darkest hour, her credibility destroyed, her friend in mortal danger, and the real criminal about to escape justice. The sound of breaking glass cut through the chaos as Aurelia managed to smash a window. Her voice, hoarse from smoke, carried across the lot. Dwyer, he's the one who... A fit of coughing cut off her words. More emergency vehicles arrived, their sirens adding to the cacophony. Firefighters began deploying their equipment as Nell stood helpless, watching the building burn with her friend trapped inside. She could see Dwyer now slipping away in the confusion, a satisfied smirk visible on his face even through the smoke. The stakes had never been higher. With each passing second, the flames grew more intense. Aurelia's time was running out, and Nell was powerless to help, restrained by the very system she had sworn to serve. The truth about Dwyer's corruption would die in that fire along with Aurelia, unless Nell could find a way to turn the tables in these crucial moments. The heat slammed into Nell like a physical wall as she and Rook approached the burning kennel. Orange flames licked up the sides of the building, turning the night sky an angry red. Black smoke billowed from broken windows, carrying the acrid stench of burning metal and plastic. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she thought of Aurelia, trapped inside. "Call the fire department," she shouted to Bram, who had followed in his patrol car. He was already on his radio, voice urgent as he reported the emergency. Nell pulled her jacket up over her nose and mouth. "Come on, Rook. Find her." The German shepherd pressed forward, his powerful body tense with purpose. They'd trained for this. Searching burning buildings was part of their certification. But this was different. This time, someone she cared about was inside. The front entrance was already engulfed, forcing them to circle to a side door. The metal handle burned Nell's palm as she yanked it open. Thick smoke poured out, making her eyes water instantly. Rook lowered his head and pressed forward, his training kicking in as he began searching for human scent through the deadly haze. The corridor was barely visible through the smoke. Emergency lights cast eerie red glows that seemed to float in the darkness. Nell stayed close to the floor where the air was clearer, following Rook's lead. The heat was incredible, making every breath painful. "Aurelia!" she called out, voice raw. "Can you hear me?" They pushed deeper into the building. Nell's eyes burned and her lungs screamed for clean air. But Rook kept moving with determination, nose working constantly. He clearly had a scent trail. Through the smoke, Nell spotted the building's fire suppression controls. The sprinkler system hadn't activated. Dwyer must have disabled it. She fought with the manual release valve, muscles straining until it finally gave way with a screech of metal. Water began raining down from overhead sprinklers, creating ghostly curtains in the smoke-filled air. The water helped beat back the flames somewhat, but visibility dropped even further as steam mixed with the smoke. Nell could barely see 3 feet ahead. She kept one hand on Rook's back, trusting his superior senses to guide them. A thunderous crash somewhere ahead made them both jump. Part of the ceiling had collapsed, sending burning debris raining down. The building's structure was failing. They didn't have much time. Rook suddenly picked up speed, pulling harder against his lead. His behavior told Nell they were getting close. Hope surged through her exhausted body, giving her a fresh burst of energy. They rounded a corner and Rook began barking urgently. Through the swirling smoke, Nell made out a human form slumped against the far wall. Aurelia was bound hand and foot with zip ties, unconscious but breathing. Angry red marks on her wrists showed where she'd fought against the restraints. "I've got you," Nell said, pulling out her pocket knife to cut the zip ties. Her hands shook as she sawed through the tough plastic. "Stay with me, Aurelia, we're getting out of here." A metallic groan overhead made Nell's blood run cold. She looked up to see the steel support beams beginning to warp from the intense heat. As she watched in horror, one of the heavy metal grates that formed the upper walkway broke free, crashing down barely 10 feet away. Flames surged up through the new opening, cutting off their route back to the side entrance. Nell's throat tightened with fear, but she forced it down. She had to stay focused. Aurelia was starting to stir, coughing weakly in the toxic air. Nell got the last zip tie cut and pulled the veterinarian's arm over her shoulders. "Can you walk?" she asked, helping Aurelia to her feet. The other woman nodded, though she swayed unsteadily. Dwyer, Aurelia managed between coughs. He's completely lost it. Said he'd rather burn everything down than go to prison. Save your breath, Nell told her. We need to find another way out of here. More ominous creaks and groans echoed through the burning building. The sprinklers were losing their battle against the spreading flames. The heat was becoming unbearable, even through Nell's protective gear. They had to move fast. Rook circled them anxiously, nose working overtime as he searched for a safe path through the inferno. His training and instincts had already saved them once tonight. Nell had to trust he could do it again. "Lead the way, partner," she said hoarsely. The German shepherd moved with purpose, guiding them down a smoke-filled hallway different from the one they'd entered through. Nell supported Aurelia as they stumbled after him, both women struggling to breathe in the toxic air. The sprinklers continued their futile shower, turning the floor treacherously slick. Behind them, another section of walkway crashed down with a deafening bang. Sparks and burning debris rained around them. The building was coming apart. But Nell refused to give up. She tightened her grip on Aurelia and pressed forward, following Rook's unwavering lead through the deadly maze. Despite her terror, she felt a fierce surge of pride in her K9 partner. This was what they were meant for, working together to save lives. No matter what happened next, Rook had proven himself 100 times over tonight, and she would make sure everyone knew it. The smoke was so thick now she could barely see Rook's tail ahead of them. But she could hear his encouraging barks, urging them to keep moving, one step at a time. Don't think about the flames. Don't think about the failing structure. Just follow Rook's lead and keep moving forward. Through the billowing smoke, Nell and Rook emerged onto the metal catwalk above the kennel area, supporting a weakened Aurelia between them. The veterinarian stumbled, coughing violently, her face streaked with soot. The steel grating beneath their feet groaned ominously with each step. "Almost there," Nell encouraged, though her own lungs burned from the toxic fumes. The exit sign glowed dimly through the haze ahead, promising safety. A shadow materialized through the smoke. Captain Dwyer stood blocking their path, his normally pristine uniform now disheveled, a pistol gripped in his trembling hand. His face was twisted with desperation and rage. "Stop right there," he commanded, voice hoarse. "You've ruined everything, Calder. Years of careful planning destroyed by some rookie and her soft-hearted mutt." Nell pushed Aurelia behind her, feeling Rook's muscled body tense at her side. "It's over, Captain. The evidence is already with the DA. Put the gun down." "Over?" Dwyer barked out a harsh laugh. "I built this department, I controlled it, and now you think you can just tear it all down?" His finger tightened on the trigger. In that critical instant, Rook launched himself forward like a black and tan missile. His powerful jaws clamped onto Dwyer's gun arm, throwing off his aim as the weapon discharged harmlessly into the ceiling. Man and dog crashed against the railing in a violent struggle. The catwalk shuddered violently under the impact. Weakened by the intense heat, sections of the grating began to tear free with a horrific screech of metal. Nell grabbed Aurelia and shoved her toward the relative stability near the wall, but lost her own balance as the floor dropped away beneath her feet. She barely managed to catch hold of a rail support, dangling precariously over the inferno below. The heat was overwhelming, flames reaching up hungrily toward her boots. Her fingers began to slip on the hot metal as smoke stung her eyes. "Nell!" Bram's voice cut through the roar of the fire. She glimpsed him through a gap in the smoke, along with several other officers who had finally breached the building. "Catch!" A thick rope snaked through the air toward her. For a terrifying moment, she thought she'd miss it. But then Rook's powerful jaws snapped closed on the line, holding it steady within her reach. With trembling arms, she grabbed hold. "Pull!" Bram bellowed. Multiple sets of hands hauled on the rope, dragging her up and away from the deadly drop. She collapsed onto solid flooring, gasping for breath as Rook pressed against her protectively. Through watering eyes, she saw Dwyer, trying to escape in the chaos. But his path was blocked by advancing officers, weapons drawn. His shoulders slumped in defeat as the handcuffs clicked closed around his wrists. "Captain Creed Dwyer, you're under arrest," Bram announced with grim satisfaction, reciting the Miranda rights as he secured the prisoner. The former captain looked suddenly old and small, his face blackened with soot, his carefully maintained authority stripped away. The conspiracy that had claimed so many buildings and endangered so many lives was finally exposed. Justice would be served. But for Nell, the most important thing was the warm, solid presence of her canine partner pressed against her side, his unwavering loyalty having saved her once again. Paramedics swarmed in, wrapping oxygen masks around their faces and checking for injuries. Through it all, Rook refused to leave Nell's side, his amber eyes alert and watchful until every last ember was extinguished and dawn began to break over the smoky horizon. In the days following the kennel fire, justice moved swiftly. Captain, Dwyer faced multiple criminal counts: arson, conspiracy, animal cruelty, attempted murder, and corruption. The evidence was overwhelming, with financial records revealing years of kickbacks and the systematic abuse of his position. The private security firm that had pushed to replace the K9 units quickly withdrew their proposal when their connections to Dwyer surfaced. Their slick marketing materials and promises of technological superiority crumbled in the face of public outrage. The community rallied behind their four-legged protectors, especially Rook, whose viral moment of softness was now recognized as the keen instinct it had always been. At the temporary shelter housing the rescued animals, Nell found herself drawn back to where it all began. The tiny kitten that Rook had first protected under the pier had recovered well under Aurelia's care. His scraped microchip and chemical-soaked fur were distant memories now, replaced by healthy growth and playful energy. "He's quite the survivor," Aurelia said softly, watching as Nell cradled the kitten. "Just like someone else I know." Nell smiled, stroking the kitten's soft fur. "I've been thinking of calling him Moat. You know, like a tiny speck that sparked something huge." Rook, who had been watching intently from his perfect sit position, rose and padded over. The massive German shepherd, who had once been accused of going soft, now demonstrated exactly why that assessment had been so wrong. With infinite gentleness, he nudged the kitten deeper into Nell's arms, his amber eyes warm with approval. "I think that's a yes vote from your partner." Aurelia laughed, her dark curls escaping their usual messy bun as she leaned closer to scratch behind Rook's ears. "The adoption papers are ready whenever you are." Later that evening, after finalizing Moat's adoption, Nell found herself lingering over coffee with Aurelia at a small cafe near the veterinary clinic. The familiar comfort of their conversations had deepened into something more, something that made Nell's heart flutter when their hands brushed reaching for sugar packets. "You know," Aurelia said, her eyes twinkling, "I never thought I'd be grateful for a viral video of a police dog being inappropriately gentle with a kitten." Nell chuckled, watching as Aurelia's fingers traced patterns on her coffee cup. "Life has a way of surprising us. A few months ago, I was just trying to prove myself as a handler. Now you're the department's rising star," Aurelia finished. "Though personally, I'm more interested in what happens off duty." Their eyes met across the table, and Nell felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with coffee. Recognition, justice, loyalty. They had all come together in ways she never expected. But perhaps the most unexpected gift was this: the promise of something new blooming between them, as natural as breathing. At her feet, Rook dozed contentedly, while tiny Moat curled up against his massive paw, both protector and protected finding their perfect balance at last. Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay with you.